Hello, good day. My name is Largen Pardillo. Together with my co-reporter, Ms. Trisha May Paraiso, we'll discuss Module 7, Lesson 1, which is the outcome-based education for teacher preparation curriculum. But before we proceed, let me show you the desired learning outcomes in this lesson. First is to define what is outcomes-based education, identify the four principles and OBE, describes how teaching and learning relate to OBE, describe how assessment of achieved learning relate to OBE, and lastly, describe the learner's responsibility and learning through OBE. Outcome-based education or OBE, William Spady defined OBE clearly focusing and organizing everything in the educational system around the essential for all the students to do successfully at the end of their learning experiences. It starts with a clear picture of what is important for students to be able to do, then organizing the curriculum, instruction, and assessment to make sure that learning happens. This definition clearly points to the desired result of education, which is the learning outcomes. And those learning outcomes includes knowledge, understanding, skills, and attitudes that students should acquire to make them reach their full potential and lead fulfilling lives as an individual in the community and at work. For further clarification, answers to the following questions should be addressed by the teachers. So first is, what do we want these students to learn? In this question, we'll enter the desired learning outcomes because this will be the basis of what teachers want these students to learn. So second is, why do we want students to learn these things? We as a future educator or even a professional licensed teachers, we must know the purpose of learning and clarify them the purpose of learning as well. So third, how can we best help students to learn these things? So teacher as a facilitator, we must know the ways on how can we help them to learn better. There are so many ways on how can we teach them interesting and fun, but at the same time, they can gain knowledge from it. So last is, how will you know when the students have learned? So in this question, it says that assessment is very important. Why? Because in this way, you can check whether your students have learned something or not. Spady premise that an outcome-based education, all students can learn and succeed, but not at the same time or in the same way. We all know that not all students are the same. Some students are good at such skills, some are not. Some students are easy to learn and some are not. But you know what is the important thing is? The important thing is everyone will learn and succeed. Successful learning promotes even more successful learning. It means that teachers should set high challenging performance standards in order to motivate students to take an active role in their learning. Schools and teachers control the conditions that will determine if the students are successful in school learning. The school and the teachers has a great responsibility in controlling and maintaining student success. Four essential principles in OBE. In order to comply with the three premises, four essential principles should be followed in either planning instruction, teaching, or assessing learning. So the first principle is clarity focus. A clear focus on what teachers want students to learn is the primary principle in OBE. Teachers should bear in mind that the outcome of teaching is learning. To achieve this, teachers and students should have a clear picture in mind what knowledge, skills, and values must be achieved at the end of the teaching-learning process. This is like looking straight ahead so that the target will be reached. So, in order to achieve This must be clear in the minds of teachers and her student, the knowledge, skills, and values at the end of the learning process. So, the second principle is designing backwards. This principle is related to the first. At the beginning of a curriculum design, the learning outcome has to be clearly defined. What to achieve at the end of formal schooling is determined as the beginning. Decisions are always tracked back to desired results. So, this means that planning, implementing, teaching or assessing should be connected to the outcomes. The third principle is high expectations. Establishing high expectations, challenging standards of performance will encourage students to learn better. This is linked to the premise that successful learning promotes more successful learning as mentioned by Spady in 1994. This is parallel to Thorndike's law of effect, which says that success reinforces learning, motivates, builds confidence, and encourage learners to do better. Which is true, di ba tayong mga estudyante, when we achieve something, mas lalo tayong nagsusumikap at mas lalo tayong nag-aaral ng mabuti. So, Principle 4, Expanded Opportunities. In OBE, all students are expected to excel. Hence, equal expanded opportunities should be provided. As advocates of multiple intelligence say, every child has a genius in him herself, hence is capable of doing the best. Learners develop inborn potentials if corresponding opportunities and support are given to nurture. So all children has the ability, skills, and knowledge, which will be developed if they are given support and opportunity. And that's all. The rest will be discussed by my co-partner.
Okay, thank you, Miss Laura. So now let us proceed to teaching learning in OBE. So teaching is teaching if learners learn. Learning is measured by its outcome. Whatever approach to teaching is used, the intent should focus on learning rather than on teaching. So it is important to consider what to teach to the students. But in teaching learning, it is important to know if the learners learned. So they measured learning by its outcome. In that case, teachers must also be innovative and think ways on how the students learn how to learn. So here are some tips on how should teaching learning be done in OBE. The first one is teachers must prepare students adequately. So in this part, teacher must first consider to know what they want the students to learn. This is with the help of stating the learning outcomes and conduct a review first about their prior knowledge on that certain topic. So it helps the teacher to assess the students which side of the topic they already know and what they need to learn. Next, teachers must create a positive learning environment. So that is the most crucial part and most important, especially when the teacher is aware that her class don't have the same personalities. So the teachers must be considerate and sensitive, since some of the students want an approachable teacher rather than having a strict teacher. So the teachers must be considerate and be careful of her treatment to the students. So they have to make her students feel that they are not alone, that they can run to or talk for problems and other concern. So next, teachers must help their students to understand. So it is important to make the students understand what the teacher wants to achieve and what are the learning outcomes they need to accomplish at the end of the lesson. The teacher as well must also make the students understand what to learn and why they should learn it. So next, teachers must provide students enough opportunities to use the new knowledge and skills that they gain. So, in discussing the lesson, students are required to assess themselves by applying the knowledge that they acquire from the discussion. So, it helps the students to know more. At the same time, the teachers evaluate their learnings and initiate proper action after that. So next, or the last one, is the teacher must help students to bring each learning to a personal closure that will make them aware of what they learned. So it is important for the teacher to make sure that the learners learn, so they will bring each learning to closure. It is with the use of strategies such as reviewing the key points of the topic, and of course summarizing the discussion. So next, shifts from traditional to OBE view. So how does traditional education differs from OBE, or outcome-based education? So here are additional key points in teaching learning in OBE which shows the shift from traditional to an OBE view. Okay, so traditional education focuses more on instructions. Okay, so they give emphasis only to what they teach, while OBE focuses on learning, where they give importance to the students learn, or how the students achieve the outcome. Next, from inputs and resources, shift to learning outcome. So they also differs on the materials they use to meet the expected learning outcome. So next, in traditional, knowledge is transferred by the teacher. So the teacher itself is the one who will initiate to give the students learning that they need. While in OBE, knowledge already exists in the mind of the students. So the students are required to study first the lesson before the teacher discuss the topic. As we have observed during an activity or giving modules, teachers usually let us learn on our own and let us answer on our own. And by that, when the virtual meeting comes, we are already have knowledge about the topic that the teacher will going to discuss. So next, in traditional, teacher dispenses knowledge, or the teacher became the facilitator of learning, where the students learn or accomplish learning with the teacher's assistance. Okay, while in OBE, teachers are designer of methods, so they innovate an engaging methods or activities, so they can achieve the students' learning and help them acquire those knowledge and preserve them in the future. And the last one is teachers and students from traditional view are independent and in isolation, while in OBE, teachers are students and students work on teams. Okay. So let us proceed to the assessment of learning outcomes in OBE. So assessment in OBE should also be guided by the 4 principles of OBE that Ms. Pardelio discussed earlier, which are clarity of focus, designing backwards, high expectations, and expanded opportunity. So it should be contribute to the objective of improving students' learning, since in OBE there is a need first to establish a clear vision of what students are expected to learn or the desired learning outcomes. Then assessment becomes an embedded part of the system. So in OBE, desired learning outcomes are expected to be established and understood by the students, so that they will know where they need to focus and what they need to acquire during the session. And after the discussion, assessment will follow to evaluate the learnings and knowledge that the students have gained. So in order to be useful in OBE system, assessment should be guided by the following principle. First is assessment procedure should be valid. Procedures and tools should actually assess what one intends to test. Next, assessment procedures should be reliable. the results should be consistent. Next, assessment procedure should be fair. Cultural background and other factors should not influence assessment procedure. Next, assessment should reflect the knowledge and skills that are important to the students. Next, assessment should tell both the teachers and students how students are progressing. Next, assessment should support every student's opportunity to learn things that are important. Next, assessment should allow individuality or uniqueness to be demonstrated. And the last one is assessment should be comprehensive to cover a wide range of learning outcomes. So these principles is important, or these principles are essential for the learners to become knowledgeable and for the teachers, of course, to evaluate what part of the topic that needs improvement and which part have met the expected learning outcomes. So in establishing an assessment, these 8 principles must be present and be guided with the 4 principles, which are the clarity of focus, designing backwards, high expectations, and expanded opportunity to make education more effective and engaging. So now let us proceed to the learner's responsibility for learning. So in OBE, students are responsible for their own learning and progress. Nobody can learn for the learner. It is only the learner himself or herself who can drive himself to learn. Thus, learning is a personal matter. Okay, so it clearly says that learning is a personal matter, which is correct because nobody will do the learning for us. Teachers will only facilitate what we should do and what learning outcome we should accomplish to say whether we are learning or not. Of course, it helps us to be aware on what we should do when we are learning. However, in terms of students' perspective, there are common questions that will guide them as they learn under the OBE curriculum framework. So to guide the students in OBE learning, they should ask themselves the following questions. So as a students, what do I have learned? Why do I have to learn? What will I know that I am learning? What should be learning? Will I have any say what I learn? And the last one, how will I be assessed? So these questions clearly organize students on how they should deal into learning. And without these questions, we cannot move forward and we will be confused where to start. So in learning, we need to be guided by these questions for us to be able to be aware and to be effectively know what to expect at the end of the discussion, which will be the learning outcome, and of course to be followed with an assessment so that we can assess ourselves what learning we have gained during the discussion. Okay. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you have understood our topic.